Hello, loathers, and welcome to the second episode of Ass. I'm your co-host, Animus, and I'm joined by the hard-working co-host, Lyft.
Hello.
And we're also delighted to welcome a very special robot and our first ever guest onto the show, and that's Cheesecookie.
Ahoy hoy meatbags.
Cheesecookie, knock knock.
Yes, I'm here. Meatbags.
Okay. You ruined my joke, but never mind. All right. Yeah, my dad used to do that. I'd say like knock knock, and he'd be like, "Come in." I was like, "Okay."
All right, fine. Who's there?
All right. So how are you guys this evening?
Excited to be here.
Yeah, good. I mean, personal dramas, but aside from that, things are good.
Yeah. Yeah, it's early morning for me. So, Cheesecookie, I was wondering, where does your name originate from? Like, were you feeling particularly adventurous in the kitchen one day, or?
Well, I still contend that cheese cookies are a terrible food, but the story actually goes back quite a long time ago into the 90s. Um, so, a friend of mine tried to get me to play Neopets. You may know that game. It's a terrible, terrible game, but I played it back in the day, and I tried to make an account, and I wanted cheese. Of course, couldn't get cheese because somebody had it. So I decided, okay, well, if I'm going to come up with a food name, I'm going to choose something that nobody would like because a cheese cookie sounds disgusting to me. Putting cheese on a cookie just doesn't seem right. So made that name, and ultimately they had an item called cheese cookies in Neopets, but typically I would try to get the name cheese on a game, and a lot of times I couldn't, so I end up taking cheese cookie, and I've just kind of been using that ever since.
If I remember correctly, there is someone called Cheese on KOL
Yeah, there is,
who's
and
actually who's active as well. I think.
yeah, they're not like super active, but I'm glad that they're not, just like a dead account.
Yeah. Otherwise, you might be having some stern words with asymmetric, I guess.
Well, if they won't give
If
Lost his
anyone
account.
has, yeah, if anyone has any specific questions for Mr. Cookie, send them in either on Discord or Twitch or however you feel. We're going to be interrogating Cheese Cookie in a lot of detail very, very shortly. But first of all, we want to mention a couple of things. Uh, First and foremost is a big thank you to Piglets of Fate, who donated the Mr. Accessories from the last podcast initial giveaway. Furthermore, thank you to Kwan, and his continued generous donations, and also Zorax and SSBB Hacks for theirs. Consequently, we do have some more Mr. A's and Spice Melanges to give away today for the best and most well thought out questions that we receive. We also have a competition, like just a silly Discord competition for the best slash funniest horsery horse names. So you can post those in the channel. I think it's best horsery names or something like, what's it called? Best horsery names, yeah. And if you don't have a horsery, don't worry. You can put your seahorse name there. And there might even be like pity prizes for like particularly terrible names or people who don't even have a seahorse or something. I don't know. And lastly, we'd be on to have giveaways in every single podcast. So, in an attempt to make a little bit of meat, which will all go into the giveaways, I will be offering my pretentious art services for your delicious meat. So, if you check in the announcements or send me a message directly, you can ask me to make art for you for meat. Anyway, so Cheese Cookie. Firstly, what brought you to KOL?
Well, that was back. Actually, my Coalversary is, I think, tomorrow, actually. So I was in game development a long time ago. I won't get into too much specifics about the game itself. People have asked, and I usually avoid it, but it was in the vein of Mafia Wars. That was kind of a popular thing back early 2010, maybe, well, whatever, around that time. And part of what I did was, well, I looked at other games for ideas. At the time I actually found Kingdom of Loathing, I was kind of in in a kind of depressed spot in terms of like running the game itself. It, just my motivation was down and all that, and I really liked what I saw here. I quite liked all the dev podcasts, all the communication that the devs had with the players, um, and I ended up sticking with the game for several years. In fact, probably the first 2 years of my game time here, I was paying for that with money from the game I was running, as as an investment, because I did get some ideas from Kingdom of Loathing, but I think mostly what I got was kind of this empathy and commiseration with how I felt Jick, etc., felt during their podcast and the things they expressed about game development, and that helped me keep. I kept doing what I was doing for a while. I mean, the game development stopped a couple of years ago, uh, but yeah, that's kind of how I ended up here.
That's a really cool history. How did you get into the scripting side of KOL then?
I mean, initially I resisted Mafia at first. I don't remember how many Ascensions it was until I even just tried it. I tried it, and I didn't really know what was going on with it. I think one of the more recent changes, I think it bringing up the Relay browser automatically is one of the great things, one of the greater changes. If I had known about the Relay browser, I probably would have been using Mafia quite a bit earlier. But I'd used it. I tried using it, didn't really get what was going on. Went back to playing the game normally, and Heavy Rains came around, and I was playing. I was playing with that, and I remember I had this nice like 3-day run going on. I was eating hell ramen and cheap stuff, and I realized that I could make quite a bit more meat if I was eating more expensive food, because I'd finish every 2 days. And I remember looking at Bum Cheek Ascend and trying to figure out if I could do anything with that. That I got some code from that. I still use the insult beer pong code from that. Thanks, Rin, of course. But I ended up just. I mean, the scripting language isn't that hard to work with. I think the first thing I wrote was just code that did insults for me. So I wrote basically like one function at a time so that I could do one less thing each run, and ultimately it started doing Heavy Rains runs. That then progressed when I got access to hardcore, because I was kind of resistant to doing a hardcore run initially. And I remember hearing people discuss some game stuff. Jimbo's Law specifically, he had mentioned some things. I wish I remember what he had mentioned, but I actually had thrown him into my Heavy Rains script, because my code was CC Ascend started all with Heavy Rains, and you may even see that in some of the code. There's still some legacy bits to it, but I started putting that in and started working with that, and it actually, I mean, leaderboarded me. It got me a bronze that for that season. I think it wasn't until a couple of challenge paths later that I tried running it with some other stuff, and I had some friends online who were curious about it, and it started that progression into trying to become a general purpose Ascension script that even worked with low skill accounts. It's still missing some older stuff. I mean, I've never done a Zombie Slayer run or a Bees Hate You run, so it doesn't even know about those. But maybe this Crimbo season I'll get around to that.
I think speak for most people listening, and definitely for myself, where we've probably all used at least some part of your scripts or bots and things like that. But as well as scripting and making bots and stuff like that, you've also spaded quite a bunch of stuff in your time in KOL, correct?
Not as much as I think people think I've done. I think more my role was enabling spaders than anything else. One of the first times that happened was during a Crimbo. It was the Crimbo with the one where you got to go into the robot, and it had the maze, kind of maze like thing. I forget which Crimbo that was, but it had the Crimbot schematics yeah, Crimbot schematics and all that. And I remember making.
That was one of the worst Crimbos. Can't remember which worst Crimbo it was, but anyway.
Well, my first Crimbo was pretty bad in terms of me knowing how to play the Animelf Crimbo. I went for a Chibi Buddy. I learned from that Crimbo, do not go for the Crimbo items during the same Crimbo. Sell everything and you can buy the Crimbo stuff later. But during the Crimbot time, I mean, I had made some guesses about the optimal configuration of parts, and my guesses weren't terrible. I think Ezendora stated out that what a better set was, but we both had competing scripts at the time, actually. There were a couple of people who were privy to giving me some information that wasn't well publicly known. It wasn't anything like secret or anything, but it wasn't well. Not a lot of people knew what was going on because they wanted to test if it was a better configuration. It ended up it was a better one. So that's one of the examples of me actually writing code to help enable some spading. Right now, we're actually working on the Cheese War Machine or the Bastille Battalion, depending on whatever you want to call it. In fact, I actually got to get this script to you later. A relay override that is tracking the changes to your stats as you make attack defense choices. We still don't quite know how relevant those numbers are, but if we don't have any data, we can't do that much about it. I'm sure Ezendora is going to put out something really pretty, but I'm worried about the spading side of it.
Right. So you've helped enable and help the spaders. I guess as a new player, I mean, what could we do, or others that are newer? How can they help the spading community?
I think sharing info is one of the biggest things. I know hardcore can be a little harsh at times. Sometimes people in there will get on your case if you say wrong things, but a lot of people there are good if you're willing to, understand that. Call them spiders. As long as you don't try to assert things that are wrong, and you're genuinely trying to get figure out things or improve the situation, hardcore can be pretty welcoming. In terms of, at least for newer players, I think sometimes just talking hardcore about things you want to do, or even asking what you can do for spading stuff. I mean, I'm not exactly sure what the best direction is for the current item of the month, and there's really not much spading to go on in G-Lover at the moment. But just potentially asking around.
Basically, ask questions. Yeah, be open, ask questions, and maybe you'll get advice.
Yeah, in terms of not as much spading stuff, one of the most common things that comes up is hardcore community service. I see a lot of people talk about that, and CC Ascend does try to actually not use all that many items of the month if it can. In fact, the requirements that people think it has are much stricter than they actually are. It can get away with a lot less. When I actually have players who try to use it and it fails, if they actually tell me about it, I can usually help them along and figure it out, and often make a change that works more permanently for everybody. Some of that led to things like, well, I had players who can't afford a puck man or a puck person, so I had someone,
Gender neutral terms only.
Things are expensive, then they weren't necessarily at the time that the script was made. So if you're patient and you're able to work with me, like, okay, I told them, all right, well, let's run the script, see where you get stuck, and tell me where you get stuck. I'll make some changes, or I need to know some details, like, what are your stats or what equipment, as long as you're patient, it works out nicely. And that has gotten it to support a lot more missing items. Now I see Quan's made a comment. So yeah, running out of meat, I'm going to need a little more details, and we can always talk about that like offline, just kind of figure out when you're running out of meat and what we can do about that. Okay, yeah, you'll poke me later about it. Cool. I mean, and sometimes, stupid things happen. My biggest grief is when I have people complain about the script, but they don't tell me. And sometimes I won't see it. I mean, I've had it told to me by a third party on some occasions. The most recent one being when I kind of came back from my hiatus and updated CCSN for Glover, and there was a mistake in the Dakota Fanning code where if you had already unlocked it and ran it in Glover, you would just get stuck in an infinite loop. And I only found out about that because Slaw mailed me. So he sent me a K-mail to tell me about that, and I have no idea how many people that affected or for how long.
If people do find something, where's the best spot to submit it? Is it on the forum post on AFH, or is it K-mail like you said?
Usually K-mail is the best for me. I don't always check the lines from Heck forums. Like I check them like every few days because they're not that active. So if you do post it there, it may take a week before I even see it. K-mail is pretty good. Even when I was on my hiatus, I was checking my K-mail at least every couple of days, and I actually did fix a bug or two. I'm looking at some of the messages in chat. So one of them about being song boom for Meat Song. I think I already do that, except in Glover, because Glover was hurting people. Discord DMs, they might work. I haven't really used Discord all that much. I'm using it more because of course, the Ascension Speed Society stuff. So yeah, that's a thing. For some more severe issues, sometimes it is helpful if we actually can be talking back and forth, particularly if I'm trying to fix a more severe error in the script, or just a more severe lacking. I mean, the script used to just outright say no when you were missing certain things. But yeah, I've had some people be very helpful in fixing stuff just by being responsive and being proactive about communicating with me.
Sounds like the least we could do. You put a ton of effort into this script, so
well, I mean,
I sure appreciate it.
I like it. I like to write code. It's what I do, to actually make a living. And I mean, this is more recreational code. And I tell my students that I code recreationally, and I don't know if they really understand or believe that I kind of do code for fun. I didn't intend for CC Ascend to become a public thing when I first wrote it, but now that it is, I still have legacy things to fix. I still have all sorts of things to fix. Anyone who wants to complain about the accessory equipping of CC Ascend, it's on the to-do list. I know it equips accessories terribly. It does a really stupid job at it. That became even more apparent in Glover, actually. But yeah, I like it. I'll look at one of these questions here. So what do I think of Ash as compared to a real language? I wish Ash had more normal array-like behavior and more normal list-like behavior, but aside from that, it's simple enough. It gets the job done. If you look at a lot of the serious code I write, I don't try to worry about too many elaborate language features if I don't have to. If I'm trying to optimize, I will. I mean, I am a C++ guy, so I will do a lot of fun C++ stuff if I can, but usually my code, at least initially, starts off really simple. You can code stuff. You can code pretty much anything with a very small subset of a language, and that's often how I approach things initially anyway. The complexities, I think, make people feel like they're cool with a language, but I often feel like the complexities often detract from people understanding the underlying behavior. Oh, I've seen a comment about the equipping the glowing red eye, and yep, I know it does that, and it pisses me off too. And I don't even have a local fix for that aside from closeting it. And yeah, it's not aware of the KGB banishes properly. It's something that I was considering hacking into CC Ascend, and then realized if I do that, it's just going to make it even harder for me to rewrite the entire thing, which I started to do, and will probably take me several days of actual just like sitting down and rewriting that whole logic, because my existing logic there is ancient, stupid, and unaware of so many things.
We've got an excellent question here from Kazyan. He says, regarding CC Ascend, in like the broadest bird's eye view, how does it make its decision? What is its decision making engine like? He says that he's curious about how the script makes a decision whether to do a quest or a sub-quest, what to tackle next, for example.
So the initial design was essentially like a finite state machine. So there's a main loop, and then so the main I think CC begin is the main loop. It prints out some data, and then it basically just goes through a list of options. So it'll be like if level 1, well, if level 2 knob, well, goblin I think it is, if level 3 tavern. It'll go into those functions, and those functions will decide whether or not it can actually do something in that turn. If it can and does something successfully, then it'll restart the loop from the beginning. If it cannot, then it goes on to the next thing. So it ends up being a sequence of just, okay, can I do this quest, this quest, this quest in order? If you actually look at the code, you'll see for a couple of classes that there's some if statements that say, okay, well, if you're in Pokefam or if you're in G-Lover, do Shen Copperhead earlier than normal, because we want to open up, if we can start Shen on day 2, we can overlap it with the hole in the sky. But it doesn't really make any smart decisions on its own. It really is just kind of bound to, can I do this quest or not? In some places, there are situations where I have like extra checks. So for the Haunted Library, if it sees that there is a writing disk digitized, it'll say, oh, I can't do the Haunted Library then, because it's assuming you're going to complete with a digitize, and it'll then move on to what's next. For the most part, it's pretty good at finding something to do these days. It used to be a lot worse, but now it'll even fall back to things like, oh, I don't know what to do. I'll go get, instead of trying to power level in the stupid way because it's not smart at that, I'll go get white pixels, or I'll go get stars and lines. It's not great. You know, making something perfect is not going to work in a general purpose case. I mean, I could probably make a decent script that plays my account really well. And as I said, for Heavy Rains, it leaderboarded me. But to make it work for everyone, or at least for a large number of people, it's tricky. It's hard to put all the logical checks that say, oh, I can do this tricky thing and save a bunch of turns, but I have to make sure I have A, B, C, and D and not have done whatever. So it's not perfect. And if you want to look at something that's a little more refined, you can look at CKB's Ascension script. His has a lot more requirements, but it definitely does better than my script, at least in, I assume his is standard, might do recent paths. It might not do older stuff. I don't actually know offhand, but I'm pretty sure it does better.
Leading on from that is, should people script things for themselves? Obviously, there's prolific scripters like yourself, Ezendora, CKB as well, but I don't think he makes his stuff public, as far as I can tell most of the time. So, do you think people should script things for themselves? Should they learn? Is it, if they do want to learn, is there much resources in terms of learning?
I think if you haven't programmed before, it's a little trickier, just because you kind of have to get used to the framework for Mafia. I mean, you have to get used to that anyway, but it's a little trickier if you haven't programmed in general. In terms of people like scripting stuff, I mean, I know I've seen people whine at I'll see someone in hardcore saying I'm writing an HC and a hardcore community service script, and they'll get a little grief for that. And it's not the worst thing to do to write your own thing. I think, at least for the practice and understanding it is, it might be more helpful for people to work together to improve scripts. There weren't that many Ascension scripts around when I put out CC Ascend, And then there was a whole bunch more that kind of popped out. I mean, there's the whole the whole drama of Ascension, which we don't need to get into. But then there were some other Ascension scripts. I think there's like 3 or 4. It's like EOD's script. There's yet another Ascension script. CKB's, of course. And there's a lot of effort put into, I'm assuming there's a lot of effort put into some of them in terms of improving their performance that would probably be better if we kind of had a unified system. That doesn't mean that's going to work out. It's hard to say how well people are going to be able to program together. There's going to be all sorts of conflicts in terms of how to script together. But so I mean, in terms of scripting yourself, I think that's probably a pretty good idea to get experience and to learn what to do. And even then, you may say, okay, well, I did this. Let me see how other people have done it, or let me use what someone else did. You know, even though I've done it myself, just for consistency's sake. And there's a lot, I guess, going on there. I think any coding is good coding. Yeah, I mean the pirates were the first thing I ever scripted. They're a pretty straightforward thing. I remember having issues with how the combat stuff worked, and combat scripts are a little weird. It depends on how if you approach it with like a CCS, it's okay, but if you try using a combat filter, it's weird. And I dealt with it such a long time ago that I don't quite remember what's weird about it. But I had looked at Bumcheek Ascend to try to figure out what I didn't understand. And looking at other scripts are helpful. I can't think of a nice small script to look at, but in terms of just like getting started, I would try to find something small. I know I had something small a long time ago. I know for the Bastille Battalion override that I was putting together, since I had to use Ezendora's Choice Adventure script, I actually looked at her override for the genie, just to see kind of how it was put together. So I had a sample of that, because even though I already kind of know what I'm coding, I need to know how to use her framework in order to do the override.
Between if you and Ezendora had a scripting showdown, who would come out on top?
It depends what we're doing. I still contend that my Crimbot script was better than hers. For a couple of reasons. One, my Crimbot script was a lot smaller. But 2, and the thing that made me really sad was I was hoping we'd get more than 3 levels, and I was hoping we'd get like randomness in our mazes, and I had coded that thing to be able to discover pathways. And then we got a hard-coded pathway that was not interesting, and I was so sad.
I hope there's going to be like a team Cheesecookie, team Ezendora sort of split in the Discord. I can hope anyway.
Well, we do different things. I mean, Ezendora's Ascension script is not public. She does her public stuff is a lot more nice user interfaces and such. I mean, user interfaces, she'll blow me right out of the water. There's no competition there. I can't design something pretty to save my life. And there are places where we have overlap on things like the detective school, the KGB, for example. So CC Ascend uses its own code for KGB. It doesn't use her code. For PokeFam, it will use her code if you have it, but if you don't have it installed, then it'll use its own code. Detective School uses her code. I had code that was working, but it had some edge cases, and I'm just like, screw it, just use her code. So her script is a dependency for that if you install CC Ascend. In fact, there's a few of Ezendora's scripts that are dependencies, and she's even said that I could use her code. So I'm not even concerned about that. I just have the import in there. In fact, CC Ascend might even install her PokeFam code now that I think about it. But if you remove it, I know it'll still work.
Right. So, I mean, we're all so appreciative of the hard work that you put into this script and maintaining not only this but all these various bots. But I guess how can we thank you for your work?
I mean,
what can we do?
I'm already stealing all your turtlenecks, so we're all good here.
So you like turtlenecks, huh?
That's the thing I collect. That's I mean, I like turtles. Turtles are my thing. If you knew me in real life, I have a lot of turtle stuff. In fact, I've even posted turtle pictures in cold chat on occasion. So yeah, I'm the turtle dude. Although I don't run Turtle Tamer all that much, unfortunately, but I still love it.
Are you wearing a turtleneck sweater?
I do not like. I like very simple clothes. I don't like I don't wear long sleeves because it bothers my elbows. I don't like turtlenecks because it bothers my neck joints. So it's just t-shirts.
This is incredibly disappointing to hear.
Well, I do have a lot of shirts with turtles on them. I have the majority of turtle-laden shirts from shirt.woot.com as well as T-Turtle. Buy from them, I get 10%. No, I wish. I don't get anything from them. But I have a ton of turtle shirts. I even have a turtle mascot outfit that I wore for Halloween for class. I think I posted that picture on chat before. So I was wearing just this big turtle mascot. If you look at Amazon, there's like this $90 turtle mascot outfit. That's the one.
I don't think there is is there a turtleneck sweater or anything like that in the KOL item database? And if there isn't, why?
I can't answer why not. I don't know.
Slaw says dreadful sweater, so
might be.
But I don't know. That doesn't sound dreadful to me. I mean, I remember when turtleneck sweaters were like a thing that people wore to be, to look good. Maybe not so much anymore.
I don't remember that in my time.
Right. So we can have more questions for Cheesecookie and such later. We're gonna move into the delicious meaty part of the podcast. So we've all had a little bit of time to get used to the cat burglar. Have you guys managed to use it much?
Well, unfortunately, I haven't used it all that much. Often on the Reddit threads, I will post about how useful these things are to hardcore community service, because that's kind of like the big thing that I push, because a lot of new players want to run that. It's not. I think it's almost useless for hardcore community service. I'm sure there's a case or two that can probably be figured out for it, but I think it essentially comes down to you have to spend 10 combats with it to get one item out of it, where you could have probably gotten that from your drops in hardcore community service. Oh, SSBB Hacks just posted my picture. In normal runs, I have not really had a chance to use it much. I've still been scripting. I mean, I took a hiatus for a bit. I've been scripting my G-Lover runs to get me enough starting Gs. So I'll probably be doing my actual leaderboard attempt later this week. So I don't.
Will it be streamed?
I didn't.
Will you be streaming this attempt?
I didn't think about that, and if I do, I would have to do it on Thursday. I have to start on Thursday. Actually, I have to look at my calendar. I actually have to go to work. I have jury duty on Monday. I have to go to work on Wednesday. But yeah, actually, if I do that, I could probably stream on the 9th. I'd like to think I could do it in 3 days, so 9, 10, 11. Yeah, maybe.
Slaw says stream jury duty.
I wish I could. I mean, and the thing is, I'm going to get kicked off jury duty. I got kicked off last time just because I have a doctorate. They kicked me off of it. I overheard the I forget which lawyer it was, but I overheard them using one of their freebies that kicked me off.
Icon said you were just speedrunning jury duty.
I would like to. I mean, I'm not opposed to doing jury duty. It's not the best time with my cat situation. My cat's dying. I'll leave it at that for now. But so it's not the best time for it. but I don't think it's going to be too long. But that being said, yeah, I could very well consider trying to stream my my horrible G-Lover attempt on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday.
We'll make sure to post what's your Twitch channel in the notes. Lyft, what have you done with the cat?
Not a whole lot. I actually used CC Ascend to farm up some starting Gs, so I will attempt to manually run a hardcore Glover myself. Recently, I think I used it in this run for an ore from the Mountain Man. Got a piece of the pirate outfit, and I believe, I got the Amulet of Extreme Plot Significance, and currently I have 3 heists charged and waiting in the wings. We'll see where I end up using those. So I don't have a ton of experience yet, but for Glover, it's definitely helpful.
Yeah, I think the best use I've seen is if you genie wish for the Mountain Man. Well, before you do that, you charge the cat to 9, wish for the Mountain Man, and then obviously on that 10th turn against the Mountain Man, you can then after you've disintegrated the Mountain Man, you can put away the cat until you know what all the trapper wants, because perhaps at that point you're not level 8.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So yeah, you can do this as soon as you have the required 150 MP. So that way you're not spending too many turns waiting to fire off that disintegrate. So use the cat, but then put it away until you're of appropriate level to find out what the trapper wants.
Do the charges and heists carry over rollover?
Heists do, but no. Like, let's say you have, because it doubles each time, so it's like 10. The first heist.
So my
is
progress
10
doesn't carry
charges.
over.
No, but the heist does.
Okay, that
the counter.
makes...
Yeah, the counter resets at rollover. Also, the queue, as in the available heists, also reset at rollover.
Okay, that makes sense as to what I saw. I just wasn't sure, and I didn't want to base it on one data point.
The only other things I could think of, like for turn gen, perhaps, or if you don't have enough item drops, maybe you can heist a milk from a goat to get that milk of magnesium, or perhaps a dieting pill from a gaunt ghoul. Those are your turn gen options. Obviously,
I was going to heist one of those, but ended up getting the drop. But that would have been a really good use, I think, in G-Lover.
That's why it's kind of better than a yellow ray, because you can know whether or not you do need to use that yellow ray, rather than yellow ray and then hope that it wouldn't have dropped otherwise, or something like that. And also it works for filthworm glands if for some reason you don't have an exoskeleton, or you can't quite make that 900% plus item, which can be quite difficult, especially in lower skill. And also I found you can steal bridge parts from the orcs. That's both the planks and the fasteners. But you have to. It doesn't like it. It doesn't like you to take them. Like, you click it, it doesn't work the first time, or the first 50 times in terms of A. Sawyer's experience. But
it might just be too smutty.
Anyway, so moving on to this month's item of the month, which was technically a month and a day late. How are you guys finding it?
Cheese.
Well, there's an important bug regarding the favorite cheeses, because cheese cookies are not in there. And while I do contend that cheese cookies are a terrible food, they should still be a favorite cheese. But aside from that, it's interesting. I think a lot of us are suspecting there's a puzzle to it. It's not necessarily obvious that there is a puzzle in it yet. Ooh, Slaw said Cheeseless is still under development. Okay, that gives me some hope. It's going to probably be a while before I ever leaderboard that thing. In terms of Ascension usefulness, I don't know if the leaderboard rewards are thrown to Hanks or not. I'd like to assume they are, but I actually have not seen any evidence to that effect. So those rewards might actually be useful if you can get 20k meat to sell. Okay, I think Slaw might be confirming they are sent to Hanks. Okay, but so it might be like the detective school, where you'll get the 3 cop dollars per crime, but you get the extra ones afterwards. So that means you don't have to worry about the leaderboarding during run. In terms of what you can get, it's kind of nifty. It's straightforward for scripting with CC Ascend. It's pretty straightforward. I mean, I just got to choose what items to select and then just basically throw a game. To that extent, I'm actually a little hesitant to put that in right now because I think people are going to want to attempt a leaderboard. So I'm probably going to put it in and leave it defaultly off so that it doesn't use up people's locked runs and they can still play around with it. But there are some good options there. And I think we'll see something with those potions. I mean, my current speculation, again, this is all speculation, I have no real proof for it yet, is that we're probably going to see some kind of distinction between people attempting to leaderboard where their main goals are going to be cheese versus people who are going to max out their stats and actually try to finish all the castles. I've been hearing things about like being able to double your cheese and such, so I don't know what's going on with that yet, but we're only a few days into the IotM month anyway, so right now it's just been trying to spade what the hell's going on.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you think of it, Lyft, in terms of perhaps an ascending point of view?
It's the meltables are nice. I do appreciate that they tagged some extra enchantments on the Moxie equip, so I could see the 25% item drop being useful, and familiar weight, while it's not as much item drop on a fairy familiar, it does work well, as you would expect with all your familiars. So it's a nice accessory, especially moving forward as we start thinking about standard 2019.
Right. So, for those who are not quite clued up on the item of the month, it's essentially 4 settings, 3 of which are important in a run. We're not going to cover the actual castle minigame because that's actually still being spaded. So we'll just talk about the run implications. So you can get a Muscle Mist or Moxie Tune static 250 substat boost. There is a Muscle Mist or Mox-aligned piece of equipment. And then there is one last one, which is the 100 turns of a buff, which is also loosely muscle, moxie, or mystical based. There we go. I think obviously you would want to tune the substat to be your main stat, and you do so by clicking the dials around the middle part of the. It's sort of like a games console, like the dials on the sides. You click those to change the settings. So you want the substats to match your main stat, at least on day one. You would want perhaps the main stat meltable that gives you the main stat substats per combat. So if you're a muscle class, you take the muscle. It's called the brutalist something, I think, and it gives 4 muscle substats to combat. And then the buff. This is still under discussion, but personally, I think the Moxie buff is probably best for day one because it gives you 25% plus meat, which is quite nice early, and also plus 25% initiative for the modern zombies. But the Mist one also gives MP, which is good for your like casting buffs and such. The Muscle one is basically just muscle and plus HP regen, which isn't too useful, at least in.
I think weaker players are going to like that one a little more, though.
Yeah, it does help with scaling fights if you are a muscle class, I guess. On later days, I imagine you'd take the Moxie item piece for the plus 25% item drop, as Lyft mentioned, and perhaps the meat buff for the nuns. And you can also you can have these buffs active later in the day. It doesn't have to be first thing in the day. So when you're ready to do the nuns within 100 turns, you can turn that buff on. Because everything comes at once, you can't pick and choose when you get things. So you either get the buff at the same time as the other stuff.
Even if you have your telescope too, you can see what stat is being tested and try and save one of those buffs, perhaps, for a stat test.
The only real trade-off is how long you have the melting item for. Because at least the buffs will carry over rollover.
And if you're hurting for turn gen, maybe you take the mysticality one for the +8 adventures. But I think you probably, if you're considering that, you would probably save more turns using the substat of your main stat to gain levels, so you don't have to power level later. But obviously that just depends on what you have and don't have and such. But moving on to our discussion today, which is the super likely, which is quite a disingenuous name because it doesn't really mean it's something that's super likely to happen. So, Lyft, tell us a little bit. Why is the super likely name a little bit of a disingenuous term?
Super likely, we can boil it down to it's a different pool of adventures. So while it might appear to be something like a non-combat or a combat, the checks for a super likely happen before you would reach a regular non-combat or combat. I updated and just removed a few of the older encounter events from this graph that's on the wiki, and I just posted it into the podcast chat channel. So there was a few things from really old Eye of the Months that we can just remove if we're thinking about 2018. But you can see where this super likely green box is. It's conditional. So it just means this is an encounter that has a condition attached to it that's forced or scheduled in some way. And so there's a whole bunch of criteria that could fall under super likely. So we'll probably be talking about some of these and where we can find them and why we care about them.
So we'll be using that term encounter rather than because a lot of the time a super likely can look like a normal combat or look like a normal non-combat, as Lyft just mentioned. So we'll be using the term encounter to not confuse things in that area. So how might we identify a super likely in terms of that hierarchy and other parts of the game?
Well, I mean, one of the easiest, and this is not always going to be the case, but if it's a thing that you encounter perhaps just once in an Ascension, it's probably super likely. The first thing that's coming to mind is your guild unlock encounters that you'll see. That's only once. Whereas if it's something that can recur and you'll see it over again, it's probably something more like a scheduled non-combat.
So does that mean it's quite difficult to actually tell whether something is indeed a scheduled non-combat or simply a super likely?
For the purposes of the super likelies or that we care about in an Ascension, it's not as bad because the ones we generally care about are easier to test. However, there are a few methods that you can use to find out, is this a super likely, is it something else, and it's based on that encounter diagram. So if you find something that has a higher priority, you can, something that's on the original is you had hipster fights, we have wandering monsters, which are really high up on the list. And so that'll begin to tell you where it falls, and then just data collection. If it's once per Ascension, you could just keep track statistically and track it like that.
So we're going to go through some of the super likelies which are relevant in an Ascension space, an Ascension run. But perhaps you could explain. So in is it the defiled alcove, I believe, is the initiative test. Is that right?
Lower right is the moderns.
Where obviously so you run initiative to get those moderns, and those moderns look like a normal combat, but they're not a normal combat because they are, what are they?
Well, those are super likely because it has a condition attached. So the reason every zone likely has something that will qualify as a super likely, but you would get them on your first adventure in the zone due to how this encounter chart works if there wasn't some condition that was stopping you from receiving this encounter. So in this case, it is tied to initiative. And because at a certain point you are guaranteed to fulfill that condition, you will see a modern zombie. If not, then it would just proceed down to a regular combat or non-combat encounter. And perhaps, Cheese, do you want to tell us why we like to run minus combat while we're searching for these modern zombies?
Well, I mean, if we get the non-combat is a nice one. In fact, all the alcove ones are nice non-combats. Are all skippable. So if we actually get that non-combat event, then we can skip that and then just try re-rolling the whole thing again.
So it doesn't take a turn, and it gives you another chance at getting that super likely.
Yeah, skippable. Yeah, no cost to use it.
So again, that's because of how the hierarchy works. So the game first rolls for a super likely, and then if it misses that roll, then it will roll for either a non-combat or a combat. And in the case where it rolls for it's obviously missed the super likely because it's rolling for a non-combat. So then when it rolls for the non-combat, you can skip it and then have another go at rolling for the super likely, which is in this case the modern zombie, which is also happens to be what you want. So, Lyft, do you want to run down some of the important super likelies we care about in Run?
All right, well, there's a few. You have your guild unlock, which is done by talking to your guild member, and it will assign you a zone. So, for instance, the muscle class, you'll find this special encounter on the 6th adventure in that zone after you receive the task. So, if you are looking for a guild unlock, make sure you accept that quest before you start adventuring in the outskirts of Cobb's Knob. There is also a super likely in the level 2 quest in the Spooky Forest, and it's helpful because it's actually, so I'm going to call it a copy of the non-combat, the Arboreal Respite, and that's important because there is that minimum of 5 turns spent in the zone before that non-combat can appear, and since this super likely is scheduled to appear after 7 or 8 adventures, if you get unlucky and you miss the roll for the non-combat a few times, then after 7 or 8 adventures you can hit that one. Also, very important, you want to tell us a little bit about the super likely in Glover for the level 4 quest?
So I have to think, wait, what?
The scream bats.
Obviously, yeah. We usually, when we say super likely, we're more often thinking of something that resembles a traditional kind of choice encounter, a non-combat, when actually there are a few combat-like super likelies. An encounter, which looks like a combat, as it were, which is in fact a super likely. And one of those is the scream bat. So obviously that zone, the Guano Junction is 0 index, so after on your 9th turn you will encounter a scream bat, and that scream bat is a super likely, which is part of the reason why it does not show up in your time spinner, but it is copyable because you can digitize that. You can spooky putty or whatever else with that. It isn't no copy. You can do as you like, and this is part of the G-Lover strategy at the moment, is your second digitize after the desk is the screen bat, because otherwise you wouldn't. It does take 27 turns, I believe, to finish to get to the boss bat. So the screen bat is one example of a super likely that resembles a combat. Another example is also the assassins in the Ninja Assassin. I can't remember the zone name. Is it Lair of the Ninja Assassins? No, Lair of the Ninja Snowmen, sorry. So this is the condition for this monster is whether you have plus combat modifiers. And there is we're going to use the term pity adventure, and we'll go into more detail in just a moment, but essentially the assassins have a chance to appear every turn depending on how much plus combat you run, and every time that the assassin doesn't appear whilst you're running plus combat, the chance increases ever so slightly until the point where after 11 turns, it's 0 index. So on turn 12, you are guaranteed to encounter a ninja assassin. So you are guaranteed 3 within 36 turns, I believe. But obviously, you hope that you don't only rely on the scheduled ones in that instance.
I'll mention one thing that goes out into the 50s too. I had something stupid in CC Ascend once. We did 50 turns in the lair, and my next 5 combats were all ninjas.
And that was running plus combat the whole time?
No, I was running minus combat, I think.
Okay. So if you run minus combat, it's literally impossible for the assassin to show up. You have to run.
While I haven't proven it, it appears they queue up. So I gotten 5 assassins in a row right afterwards. I'm not sure if that's the case, because this is literally one data point that I got 5 in a row once I put plus combat on, and I think there's also an increase in the rate that you get them as you spend more adventures, so it may have been that. But so take that with a grain of salt when I say that when they queue up, that's speculation on my part.
Where else do we see these elusive superlikelies?
Well, in everyone's favorite Friar quest, if for some reason you have not seen a non-combat encounter, you can get a copy of that in each of the zones, and you would get them after 5, 10, and then 15 turns spent in the zone. So what is that? A maximum of 16 turns spent per zone for the friars.
Yeah, I think it's 0 indexed again. So yeah, 16 turns.
And cheese, we keep using this term 0 index. Simply put, what does that mean?
Oh, well, like normal things, when we start counting at 0. So you don't start 1, 2, 3. You start 0, 1, 2. That's the way nature works.
One important note about the Friar quest is that whether you get the first 2 non-combats very, very early, turn 6 and turn 11, they can only be one specific non-combat. So turn 6 can only be the first super likely, not non-combat. Turn 6 is a super likely which resembles the first non-combat. Turn 11 is a super likely which resembles the second non-combat. So if you get a non-combat on turns 1 and 2, you could still see nothing until turn 16, which is why that zone, at least, it's still pretty bad in terms of how long it can take. But I remember back in the day, there was no pity adventures there, so you could just spend lots and lots of turns, and then they changed it so that you could only you had a max amount of turns you could spend before the super likely came up. But but now that's 16 turns max in each zone, so you can have as bad as a 48. Is my math correct? Yeah, 48 turn friar is the absolute worst case if you're unlucky or not running any plus non-combat.
So as opposed to that one, some of these super likelies are affected by your minus combat. So there's a super likely in the haunted bathroom, which if you're running minus combat, it will aid in you finding that super likely, of course, after you've spent the requisite 5 turns in that zone.
Conversely, for people doing G-Lover and having to do the Copperhead quest, Shen is not affected. The Shen super likelies are not affected by plus non-combat. So running non-combat in the Copperhead Club will not help you. It would not make it quicker. I think it's something like 4 turns of delay, and then their first one, and then I think we're still not too sure. Because no one's really spent that much time spading it accurately because no one wants to do it. But I think overall it takes around 15 turns to get all 3 super likelies to finish and get the the snakehead charm or whatever it's called in that area.
Now, couldn't we use a LAR run to try to figure that out? I mean, if someone actually wants to put the effort in.
I imagine so. LAR is pretty much the best place to spade anything. The LAR has, well, the problem is that you have to figure out what every turn has a super likely roll, and then after that it has the non-combat roll, and it's difficult to know what the super likely roll is. You can spade what the non-combat roll is. The way I did it was that I went to an area of very, very low combat rate, like 95% combat rate in for example, I think I used at the time I didn't know what the combat rate was for sure. So I used the slime tube, I believe, because the slime tube is 95% combat. So I would go there and check every turn and see if I got a non-combat, and if I did, then it meant that I got that the non-combat roll was very, very high, for example. Super likely is a little bit more difficult. I can't even remember how I was spading that. I think I used assassins and also the door for the surgeon door in the hidden city.
Oh, the hidden hospital. Nice.
The hidden hospital, yeah, because that is a super likely as well.
So that's one of those others super likelies, that its condition is wearing the surgeon gear, and your roll for it increases, I think, by 10% per gear equipped.
So I think maximum 50% is it? Is there 5 pieces, so. Right?
Can you dual equip the scalpel?
I'm not sure if that works, and if it does work, I'm not sure. Maybe it works. Okay. So
another place that we care about it being a super likely, because it would affect how you approach the zone, would be in the pirates. When you're looking for that first encounter with the captain, you and the captain make it happen, and that one is a super likely that is not affected by your combat rate. So what you can do in that instance is run your plus combat, because it doesn't matter, in order to get your pirate encounters and start collecting those insults. And since you can't influence that encounter with your combat rate, it means that you'd probably be better off if you have the Meteor Skillbook item of the month using your macrometeorites somewhere else, because you still need to spend enough turns there to find that captain encounter.
So essentially, you can run the plus combat even though the super likely looks like a non-combat, and every time you miss it, it goes up. Do we know how much the chance goes up?
I think someone spaded it, but I'm not remembering right now.
I vaguely remember Slaw saying like 5% per turn missed or something.
He just said in chat, no one knows. No.
Oh, no one knows. Okay. So we keep using this term in the pity adventure. So by pity adventure, we mean that after a certain amount of turns spent in a zone, you're guaranteed to get this adventure. One example is, this is something that I discovered in LAR, is that the Palindrome has some pity adventures. So if you go, I think it's around 5 turns. I'm not too sure. I think it's around 5 turns. If you don't get a non-combat, you will get a. Oh no, sorry, they're all super likelies. But if you don't get that super likely, in fact, are they super likelies or are they just normal non-combats?
I don't actually know myself.
Because I know before that was changed, as in before the revamp of the Palindrome, it was Slaw's saying no one really know. They used to be super likelies, I believe, but they are affected by non-combat, so it doesn't really matter in that regard. But if you, for example, go a certain number of turns without seeing one of the palindrome non-combats or super likelies, whatever they are, then you will get a super likely version, which is the pity adventure, the pity form of it. There are quite a few other pity adventures. Do you want to talk us through a few of those, Lyft?
Yeah, there's a few of these. So we already said the Friars. There's also one in the Haunted Gallery on the second floor of Spooky Raven. As we mentioned, there's one in the Spooky Forest. See, what were the others?
There is the oil. Sorry, there is a in the Twin Peaks. If you, I think, is it 50 turns? After 50 turns, the whole thing just burns down. Which I think there was a problem in which path was it? It was.
I think, was it Bees Hate You?
I think, yeah, Bees Hate You. Where that the only way you could do that zone was to brute force with the 50 adventures, and anyway you could miss the adventure and you'd have to spend another 50 adventures to finish the zone. So you could have to spend upwards of 100 adventures just to finish the Twin Peak. So I think they changed that. Whether they changed it to be hard coded or just,
I think it was just a super likely that is checks to see if you have spent X amount of turns here, and then gives you on the next adventure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's only a few handful of events that rely exactly on turn count spent, so that like for instance, if you were to place a wander on the turn exactly where that number would show up, you'd miss it. So I think Hole in the Sky is one if you have a space jellyfish, because you're going to get that space directions encounter on the third adventure in the zone, and then after that it's every 7, so turns 3, 10, 17, and so on.
Yeah. I think that's pretty much it in terms of super likelies that matter in run.
Right, so it's just being aware that knowing they exist. Sometimes they're more important in a challenge path because your usual methods of dealing with the zone are altered. So I think the Scream Bat is probably one of the most relevant cases of it being a super likely that we've had.
One last thing I want to mention in terms of super likely is that when you finish the first part of the second floor quest in the Spooky Raven place, so you finish the gallery, you've got the shoes, you've killed the makeup monster in the bathroom, and you've got the elegant night gown, I think it is. Don't spend a turn in the ballroom, because if you wait until after you get the diary, you can spend that turn there for a free -1 delay, because there's 5 turns of delay once you have the diary to open the bottom floor. The basement of the Spooky Raven. So you can actually wait with the adventure that gives you the substats for finishing the first part of the Spooky Raven 2 level 2 quest, and use that to burn delay for the Holy MacGuffin part of the quest.
And I think it was mentioned here that encounter is available before reading the diary.
So that's right, you can burn the delay preemptively, I believe, right?
I believe so.
So it doesn't actually matter when you burn the delay, because they change. Yeah, because it's basically checking for turns spent now rather than having a delay mechanic. I believe that's how it works now. So you can actually spend that. You can spend that turn there anytime. So you can just ignore completely what I said, but yeah, at least you know that it counts as the delay, like minusing the delay like mechanic.
I like Slaw's suggestion here to put 5 wanderers there and skip the subset super likely.
But then it will compete with the all be flat, right? Because because all be flat is a super likely, and then the 100 substat is a super likely, and then it's a 50-50 which one you roll when they're both available.
I don't know how it gets chosen, but hey, if you can avoid that, that could save a turn.
That could save a turn. The things we do.
You could also lose a turn as well. If you roll,
then it doesn't
if you roll
count.
badly.
We just want to talk about that.
Oh yeah, I see.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, good coverage. It's useful to know. The encounter chart is interesting, and just reading about the adventure queue and combat queue, which I'm sure we'll talk about more in a future episode.
There's actually a thing or two we need in the encounter chart for I guess the ontology could use port scan, protonic ghosts, and there is an ordering to the wanderers. Like if you have multiple wanderers do it once, like Arrow, Digitize, and Holiday, there is an ordering to that. I don't remember it offhand. I remember having to mention it once to Lost in terms of having Mafia be able to recognize the wanderers in the DMT zone, because that screws up Mafia's tracking. So that's something that could actually probably be used to expand the encounter chart, so we have a better understanding of some of these little sub events, I guess.
Sojourn just mentions that in the upper chamber you guaranteed a wheel after the third turn, I believe.
It's after the third.
So it's
a super likely.
Yeah, well, are we sure it is a super?
Yes,
it is.
We
right,
are sure now. Mm-hmm.
It competes with the unlock. You have a 50-50% chance to get the middle floor unlock or the wheel if you keep pushing the wheel back, and you would push the wheel back by basically putting wanderers in there
or Turkey Blaster.
Or Turkey Blaster, yeah. So you use a Turkey Blaster in the so you spend a turn in the the upper chamber, use a Turkey Blaster, and then you have a 50% chance of either unlocking the middle floor or getting that pesky wheel. So that's how we know it's a super likely, not a scheduled non-combat. Because if it was a scheduled non-combat, you would get the super likely to unlock the middle chamber every time, not only 50% of the time.
Yeah, very good.
So, shall we move on to a softcore pull, like softcore pulls, or perhaps some user questions if we have some?
We can hit a few of the. No, he's not. We can hit a few of the minor questions if we want to tackle. So we're at the hour and 15 mark.
Yeah, sure. Questions are good.
Let's go with some questions.
We do mention the writing desk a lot, and I guess why it works now and why might it not work next year.
So the problem with the reason why the writing desk is used so much right now is that you can skip the entire everything apart from the writing desk. You can skip the first floor of Spooky Raven, so you can skip the haunted kitchen, you can skip the haunted billiard room, and fight 5 desks, talk to Lady Spooky Raven, and go straight to the second floor. Now, next year, we lose Digitize, which means we lose a way to copy the desk a number of times. We, of course, could wish for 3 desks on day 1 and then 2 desks on day 2, but this is just painful in terms of routing, and also overall whether it actually saves turns to do it that way is something to be disputed. But it's probably better to, at least from the point of view now, is that next year when the source leaves standard, is that there'll be no way to skip the first floor, and we'll have to do it the old-fashioned way. This could obviously change. We have the Anamarang still. We have 4 more months of items of the month, which could give us another Digitize-esque sort of thing. So we don't know what happens, but right now it looks pretty bleak in terms of skipping floor 1. What do you think, Lyft?
Well, we'll see. Like you said, a few more months to go, but hey, we'll get to learn how to optimize the first floor of Spooky Raven again.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm
The copiers are probably not all worth being spent on the writing desks, like using the enamorangs or possibly even going out of your way for a 4D camera. And you're not going to be able to time spin it, unfortunately, because that would defeat the purpose of skipping the first floor. So I suspect we're probably going to end up, unless we get a new Digitize or equivalent, we're going to play around the first floor again.
I'm I'm welcome for. I mean, the desk has been a thing for quite a few. It's been around before people even knew it was around because I don't know who started it, but I remember Slaw was doing it a long, long time ago. With
Rain Man?
dumb stuff. I can't even
I,
remember what he was using back
I think
then, but
at
it's
least
been
as
around
far
a while. I'm happy to.
at
Sorry.
least as far as Heavy Rains, because my Heavy Rains script was doing that.
I'm happy for a change of pace personally. Save some turns, but hopefully those are turns which are saved in new and exciting ways elsewhere. We can look forward to what the items of the month bring, I guess.
Yep, some new ways to save turns is always fun.
And it also means we can do something else with our wishes for once. Like, that turn one that first turn wish is always the desk. At least now we have a little bit more. Next year we'll have a little bit more leeway and perhaps interesting strats that save turns in other ways. Is there a question on your side there, Lyft?
No, not that I've seen.
There was one for Cheesecookie earlier, which I can't because there's like questions in different places, and I can't remember which part it was put. Someone asked about the God Lobster again. So yeah, essentially, you fight it to get the piece of regalia, fight it again to get the plus substat buff, and that's when you go and do your love fights. This is assuming you have those items at the month, of course, and then you can do the last lobster fight a bit later on. Uh, Lately, I've been doing it for the MP per turn buff because it's just so nice to have 40 MP a turn and you can run all the buffs you like. I think you said it's really nice for standard, right, Lift?
I mean, it makes life really easy. It's not as fiddly on those first few turns. So I do enjoy the 40 MP buff because in standard you have access to a lot more skills and they're expensive to maintain.
MP in
And
early game is difficult.
Mm-hmm. And then in G Lover, well, you don't have as many skills to choose from, but you can just stock up for the rest of the day.
And obviously, meat is quite scarce in G-Lover for the same reason. I think this is a good question for you, Cheesecookie. Why might is it worth using banishes in the Gauntlet? And if it is, why?
That's. I feel like someone's done the numbers for that. For me, I think it just depends on how many banishes you have. Like, if you're a seal clubber, go for it, because you can batter up all day long. Um, the the Goatlet itself does have a pity adventure, so you will get the goat cheese if you end up being in there too long. Um, I guess I would say if you're a seal clubber, definitely. If you're not, and you really kind of want to see how many banishes you have left in the day, if you're near end of day, you still have some banishes left, go for it and knock one out. Um, I mean,
why is being a seal clubber relevant
well,
to this
because
discussion?
you get batter up.
What does batter up do?
So batter up uses up 5 fury, use beta all your fury, and it banishes a monster as a seal clubber. You have to be equipping a club, of course, and you also have to have the requisite skills in order to have 5 fury. So you need like Ire of the Orca, whatever. All stuff that lets you get a lot of fury. But you can charge that up in less than 5 combats, so it's pretty easy to banish all day. Now, it's not a free banish, unlike the Asden Martin banisher, which ends the combat, banishes, and doesn't cost you adventure. Batter up does cost you adventure, and I think it destroys the drops, but you're not going to use it on someone whose drops you care about anyway. It's probably the most prolific banisher I can think of because you just get to reuse it so often.
Exactly. And as we mentioned in past episodes, I think we'll go into more detail at another time, is that it's better to use banishers in a zone with fewer monsters rather than a zone with more monsters. So if there's a zone where you only... Exactly. So if you have a zone where you only want one monster, for example, the goatlet, and you only want the dairy goat, using a banish there is more powerful than using, for example, a banisher on a taco cat in the palindrome, because there are more monsters, there's a bigger queue, and things are more likely to fall out of the queue by themselves.
Definitely. I mean,
right, and as Cheese said, it's going to be on how many banishes you have access to.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you the general approach that CC Ascend does. In zones where there are 3 monsters, it'll tend to use the banishes. So it does prefer that situation, and it doesn't. I mean, CC Ascend would banish in the goatlet. It doesn't. It's not looking too far ahead into the future, unfortunately.
Right. Lord Haplo says, the wiki says that the encounters in the palindrome are 3 superlikelies, and it doesn't mention that they're being affected by minus combat. I can confirm that they are affected by minus combat. I can't confirm whether they are indeed a superlikely or a regular non-combat. I imagine probably a superlikely, since they only occur once. But they are definitely affected by non-combat, and there are definitely pity versions of those encounters at the very least. If there's any last few questions... I almost forgot about the best horse renames as well. I don't know about you guys, but my personal favourite... I'm very suspicious about Somersaulter's very legit horse name, the God Horse. It looks like he might have photoshopped that. I'm not quite sure.
I mean, I can't confirm it. I mean, it just could be I haven't seen that particular one yet. But I did like the... what is it? Underground Cream. Very much.
Yeah. Underground Cream has gotten a lot of okay signs and glasses of milk.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That's one of my personal favorites. There's been no love for mine, which was Coincidental Peanut. I thought that wasn't too bad.
It wasn't too bad, but we can't let you win everything.
There's Lord Haplo has one here called Vague Mimosa. If that was Vague Miasma, I think that would have been really good.
Yeah, and then just as far as our next episode, feel free to put some thought out questions into our podcast related questions channel. That way we can try and answer those next episode and put a little thought into them as well.
I think we'll decide who gets the stuff off stream. I imagine most people are going to get a Melange at this rate. We've only got I'd say less than 20 horses have been entered, but I think Underground Cream does... someone's put thumbs down to Underground Cream, so someone... That's still an emote, though. That still counts as a vote. I'm sorry. So I guess we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Yes, and thank you again, Cheese, for making some time to join us on this episode.
Oh, of course. I'd love to join you guys again. I mean, I love the podcast community that we used to have with Jick and Hot Stuff, and would love to see... I mean, I'm so glad that you guys are doing this and we're having some active public discussion.
Yeah, and I'm sure you'll be back one day soon. So that's me out, and I guess we'll see you again in a couple of weeks. And we'll probably be around in hardcore IRL for a while to chat with anybody who wants to talk. Bye-bye.
Take care.